The late autumn afternoon settled over the city in a muted hush. Golden leaves swirled along the rain-dark sidewalks, the light fading to amber through the wide glass of the cafe windows. Inside, Zane Wilder sat alone, the image of composure carved from stillness. His charcoal gray suit fit like quiet armor. His silver watch caught the dim glow of the overhead lights with precision. To anyone passing by, he looked like a man who had it all under control. Clean lines, quiet power, the kind of grace people mistook for peace. But it wasn't peace. It was survival. Before him, an untouched espresso cooled beside a single white tulip in a narrow vase. A deliberate design detail of the cafe, maybe. But to him, it meant something heavier. He'd chosen the same flowers for his brother's memorial. White tulips. Simple, unspoken, like all the words he never said. It had been a year since the accident. A year since Leo's laugh had gone silent in the crash Zane still dreamed about. He had built homes and towers since then, created spaces that whispered serenity, but his own life remained an empty room. Tonight was supposed to be one last attempt, his final blind date before he closed that door forever. "This is the last one," he murmured under his breath, his fingers tapping lightly on the porcelain rim of his cup. After tonight, no more pretending. No more polite conversations with strangers who wanted to see the man in the magazines rather than the one carrying ghosts. He looked up, catching his reflection in the window. Sharp suit, steady gaze, expressionless. A man who looked alive but wasn't really living. He exhaled, turning his head slightly as the cafe door opened with a soft chime. A cool breeze followed someone inside, carrying with it the faint scent of rain and lavender soap. Her steps were quiet but certain. Mira Lane paused near the door, eyes scanning the room. She wore a pale blue dress that had seen better days, its hem slightly frayed. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a low ponytail, strands escaping to frame her face. No jewelry, no makeup, just a natural calm that didn't belong in a place full of artifice. When she spotted him, she froze for a moment. Her breath caught, and something unreadable flickered in her eyes. She walked toward him with measured steps, her hands clasped together like she was holding her courage in place. Zane rose automatically, not from warmth but habit. "Mr. Wilder," she said softly, her voice careful but kind, extending a hand. He looked at it, then at her, and didn't take it. Instead, he reached for his coat, the silent signal of retreat. Mira hesitated, her smile faltering. The seconds stretched between them, awkward, fragile. Then, instead of retreating, she said quietly, "Wait. I think you once helped my daughter." Zane froze mid-motion. His coat slipped from his fingers, landing silently on the chair. She reached into her worn leather bag and pulled out a photograph. It was creased and smudged, handled too many times to count. She set it gently on the table. In the photo, a soot-streaked man was carrying a small girl in a torn pink dress, her face tear-stained, the air around them blurred by smoke. Zane's breath caught. He didn't need her to explain. He remembered. The heat, the crash, the scream, the tiny hands clawing at a window, his own lungs burning as he tore the door open and pulled the child free. "That was my daughter," she said softly. "Redwood Highway. 2 years ago." He couldn't speak. The air between them seemed to thicken, the cafe sounds fading into a distant hum. His hand twitched slightly as if to reach for the photo, but stopped halfway. "I try not to remember," he said finally, his voice rough. Mira smiled faintly, sadness flickering in her eyes. "Well, maybe fate decided you should." The light from the window shifted, catching the edge of the photograph, the tulip, his trembling hand. Zane stared at the image, at the man he'd been then, soot-smeared, terrified, alive. For the first time in months, something stirred behind his calm facade. Mira took the photo back gently and slipped it into her bag. "I remember everything about that day," she said quietly. The rain, the turn, the scream. She told him how her car had flipped, how she'd woken upside down, her baby girl trapped and crying, how she'd smelled fuel and felt the world closing in, how the paramedics said a man had pulled the child out seconds before the explosion, then vanished before anyone could thank him. She reached into her bag again and placed something else on the table, a small, faded business card. "You left this," she said. Zane looked at it. His own handwriting stared back at him, shaky and uneven from smoke and adrenaline. "If she's okay, send a postcard." He had written that without thinking, without expecting an answer. He hadn't wanted to be found. I kept it, she said. I never sent a postcard. I didn't know what to say. What could I possibly say that would be enough? Her eyes met his. But I always told myself that if I ever saw you again, I'd find the words. Zane's throat tightened. He couldn't look away. The woman sitting across from him wasn't some stranger now. She was a piece of the moment he'd buried. The proof that something good had survived the fire. I saw your face in a magazine, Mira said suddenly, trying to smile. You were in this ridiculously white kitchen. Luna, my daughter, recognized you before I did. She pointed and said, "That's the man who saved the girl." Zane's lips parted, but no words came. Mira's voice softened. I never got to say thank you. The world around them seemed to still. Zane lowered his eyes, his fingers tightening around the edge of the table. For a long time he said nothing. Then he gave a small nod, quiet, almost imperceptible, but it said everything. Outside, the wind caught a swirl of leaves and carried them past the window. Inside, two strangers sat across from each other, bound by a memory that neither could fully escape. And for the first time in years, Zane Wilder's stillness wasn't born of emptiness. It was the moment before something long frozen finally began to move. The hours had passed unnoticed. The cafe that once hummed with the soft rhythm of chatter now stood quieter, filled only with the faint echo of clinking cups and the occasional creak of the wooden floor. The evening lights outside had deepened into indigo, and the reflection of the city shimmered faintly in the window behind them. Mira stirred her coffee absently, the spoon tracing slow circles. I didn't expect you to remember, she said finally, her voice low. You probably saved many people that day. I remember everything about that fire, Zane replied quietly. But I try not to, her eyes softened. Because it hurts? He looked away, his jaw tightening. Because remembering doesn't change anything. There was something brittle in his tone, a quiet exhaustion buried under calm. Mira didn't push. Instead, she reached into her bag again and took out a folded piece of paper. This was drawn by Luna, she said, handing it across the table. He hesitated before taking it. The drawing was of a tall man with dark hair holding a little girl beside a car wrapped in red and orange flames. The lines were messy, the colors bold and innocent. But there was a small detail that made his throat tighten. The man's eyes were colored blue, the same as his. She still remembers, Mira said. Every night she asks if heroes ever get tired. Zane's lips curved faintly, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. And what do you tell her? I tell her they're not heroes, she said, her voice trembling. Just people who still choose to help even when they've been hurt themselves. Silence hung between them again, but it wasn't awkward this time. It was heavy, full of unspoken things, pain, gratitude, and something unfamiliar that neither dared to name. Zane folded the drawing gently and set it on the table. You're a single mother, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Mira nodded. Yeah, Luna's father left when she was 2. Said life was too heavy for him. I guess I was too. She tried to make it sound casual, even laughed softly, but her eyes betrayed her. They carried the kind of exhaustion that came from years of pretending everything was fine for someone else's sake. I work part-time at a flower shop, she continued. Mornings are for deliveries, evenings for Luna's homework. Nights are for catching my breath. Zane listened without interrupting. Something about the way she spoke, the way she didn't decorate her pain, disarmed him. It was the first real conversation he'd had in months that didn't feel like a transaction. He noticed her hands as she spoke. Small scars ran across her fingers, faint, old, almost invisible. Those? He asked softly. She glanced down, surprised. From the fire, she said. I don't hide them. They remind me I got to keep her. Zane's gaze lingered on her hands for a moment before he said, You're stronger than you think. Mira smiled faintly. No, I just didn't have a choice. A small laugh escaped him then, soft, brief, but real. It startled even him. Mira looked at him, surprised, then smiled back. The sound felt like a crack in the quiet armor he'd built around himself. The waitress came by, offering to refill their cups, but both declined. The conversation didn't need caffeine anymore, it was carried by something deeper. You said you were here for a meeting? Mira asked after a pause. He hesitated. A blind date. Oh, she said, blinking. I'm sorry. Did I? No, he interrupted gently. She wasn't coming. A shadow crossed his face, one that told her there was more to the story. But she didn't ask. Sometimes, Mira said softly, the people we're supposed to meet aren't the ones we expect. Zane met her gaze then. Something flickering in his eyes, curiosity, maybe disbelief, maybe recognition. You believe that? I have to, she said simply. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. He leaned back, studying her quietly. The rain had started again, a light drizzle tapping softly against the glass. Mira turned to watch it, her reflection faint beside his. Luna thinks raindrops are tiny souls finding their way home, she said. I used to tell her that when she missed her dad. Now, I think it's true for me, too. Zane said nothing for a long while. Then quietly he asked, what about you? Have you ever found your way home? Her lips trembled into a small smile. Not yet, but I'm still walking. He nodded slowly, his eyes distant. For a fleeting second, he wondered what home even meant for him anymore. A building, a memory, a person. He wasn't sure. A small vibration broke the silence. Mira's phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up, smiling, as a small voice echoed faintly through the speaker. Mama, did you find the man from the picture? Zane froze. Mira laughed softly. Yes, Luna, I did. Did you say thank you? I did. Did he smile? Mira glanced at him, her eyes softening. Not yet, she said gently. But maybe soon. Zane looked down, unable to hide the way his expression faltered. When Mira hung up, the air between them felt different. Warmer, quieter, charged with something fragile but alive. He reached for his wallet then, pulling out a small folded card. It was an invitation, an exclusive charity gala he'd been avoiding. He slid it toward her. You should come, he said. Bring your daughter, it's for the families of victims from the Redwood accident. I fund it every year, but I never attend. Mira looked at the card, her brows knitting. Why tell me? Because maybe this year I will, he said, his voice steady. And maybe I don't want to go alone. Her breath caught, unsure if he meant it or if it was politeness. But when she looked up, his gaze was steady, gentle but unguarded. The rain outside thickened, blurring the street lights into golden halos. And for the first time that night, Zane Wilder smiled. Not the one from the magazines, the perfect practice smirk, but a small, human smile that carried both pain and possibility. When Mira left the cafe, the white tulip still stood between their empty cups, petals open wide as if the flower itself had been waiting for this moment. And somewhere deep inside him, Zane realized he had just met someone who might quietly change everything. The night of the gala arrived with the kind of chill that made breath visible in the air. Fragile, fleeting, like ghosts of words left unspoken. The city glimmered beneath strings of amber lights, streets slick with rain that reflected everything in gold and glass. Zane Wilder stood before the grand glass doors of the Astoria Hall, his reflection staring back, a man wrapped in a tailored black suit, sharp lines, controlled calm. But beneath the perfection, his pulse felt uneven. He hadn't stepped into this event in years, not since the foundation began. Every year he funded it, every year he stayed away, until tonight. He adjusted his tie with mechanical precision, trying to quiet the unease in his chest. The air smelled faintly of roses and champagne. Behind him, cameras flashed as guests arrived, city officials, celebrities, socialites, people who wore grief like fashion, polished and convenient. Then through the crowd, he saw her, Mira. She stood at the edge of the staircase, one hand resting lightly on the shoulder of a little girl. Luna. Her dress was soft pink, simple but radiant, her curls bouncing as she looked around in awe. Mira's dress was pale silver, modest yet graceful, her hair swept to one side, eyes shining with nervous calm. She looked out of place and yet completely at home, like she carried her own light into the hall. When she caught sight of him, she froze for a second. Then she smiled, uncertain but real. Zane felt something in his chest unclench. He crossed the marble floor toward her, each step deliberate. The noise around them faded into a dull hum. When he finally reached her, he said quietly, "You came. You invited me," she replied, her voice soft. And Luna wanted to meet the man who doesn't smile. Luna giggled beside her mother, clutching a small tulip wrapped in tissue paper. "This is for you," she said, her little voice bright and clear. Zane knelt slightly, accepting the flower with care. "Thank you," he said, And Luna grinned as if she'd just won something grand. She said it means forgiveness, Mira added gently. Zane looked at the white tulip, the same kind that haunted his memories. And for the first time, the word didn't sting. Maybe it means new beginnings too, he said softly. They found a quiet corner as the speeches began. Around them, people applauded, glasses clinked, music swelled. But for Zane, the world had narrowed to her voice, her presence, her calm. You built all this, she said, glancing around. The charity, the architecture, the walls. He gave a faint smile. The walls, yes. I'm good at those. And yet here you are trying to tear them down? He looked at her then. Really looked. Her eyes didn't hold pity, just understanding. The kind of understanding that didn't ask for explanations. I lost my brother in that fire, he said quietly. The words heavier than he expected. Leo, I was supposed to be in the car with him that night. But I wasn't, I was late. I've been trying to build something worthy of that guilt ever since. Mira's expression softened. And have you? He exhaled slowly. No, but maybe I'm done trying to fix the past. Maybe it's time to live the life he never got to. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Mira reached out, her hand resting lightly over his. The contact was gentle, tentative, two broken edges meeting without cutting. Leo wouldn't want you to stay buried with him, she said. Sometimes the best way to honor the dead is to choose the living. Zane's fingers closed around hers almost instinctively. And what if I don't know how anymore? She smiled faintly. Then let someone remind you. The music changed, soft, slow, a piano melody that filled the hall like a sigh. Zane hesitated, then stood and offered her his hand. Mira looked uncertain but took it. They moved onto the dance floor, slow and unsure at first. His hand rested at her waist, hers lightly on his shoulder. It wasn't perfect. They stepped on each other once, laughed awkwardly, found rhythm through shared clumsiness. But somewhere between laughter and stillness, something in him began to heal. Luna watched from the table, her eyes shining. When the song ended, Zane and Mira lingered a moment longer before stepping back. See? Mira teased gently. You do smile. Zane blinked, realizing she was right. And it felt effortless. Later that night, as guests began to leave and the lights dimmed, Zane walked Mira and Luna to their car. The air outside was cool, the rain now a soft drizzle. Thank you for tonight, Mira said. He shook his head. No, thank you for showing up when I stopped believing in that. Luna climbed into the car, clutching her stuffed toy. Mira turned to face him one last time. Maybe we'll see you again, she asked quietly. Maybe sooner than you think, he said, his voice carrying a promise neither of them needed to explain. She smiled, then leaned in, pressing a light kiss against his cheek. Good night, Zane. He stood there as the car pulled away, the white tulip still in his hand, the petals trembling in the cold breeze. The taillights disappeared into the rain, but instead of the familiar ache of goodbye, there was something else, something alive. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the windows of his apartment for the first time in months. On his desk sat the tulip, now in a glass of water, and beside it Luna's drawing, creased but perfect. He picked up his phone, hesitated, then typed a message. Breakfast tomorrow? I owe Luna a smile. He didn't wait for a reply. He simply set the phone down and looked out at the skyline. His city, his creation, finally starting to feel like home. And somewhere, in the echo of that quiet morning, Zane Wilder realized that sometimes love doesn't arrive with fireworks or destiny. It walks in quietly, carrying a photograph, a drawing, and a single white tulip that refuses to die.